Good afternoon or evening, and welcome to Writers Unplugged. This is a series to hear your favorite writers or new to you writers in conversation as if you were eavesdropping on us in a coffee shop. My name is Jen Jumba. I'm a librarian at the main branch of Cleveland Public Library, and one of my favorite things besides reading is talking to writers. It's an opportunity to get to know their craft, what inspires their stories, where they like to write, essentially getting to know them better and seeing them as human beings and not just the name on the spine of a book. And we are so lucky to have Sagit Schwartz joining us this evening or afternoon, depending on where you're watching, to talk about her brand new book, Since She's Been Gone. But before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. To find out who else is visiting Writers Unplugged, both virtually and in person, visit cpl.org/upcoming. And Max Beck's Books on Coventry is our favorite and wonderful independent bookstore. They have copies of Sagit's books for you, just waiting for you to order when we're done with this conversation. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and I'll be sure to ask. So a brief introduction to Sagit Schwartz. She is a writer, a producer, a licensed psychotherapist, and her work has been featured in Medium, Slate, The Atlantic, Reddit, No Sleep, and Lifetime Television. She resides with her husband, daughter, and rescue dog in a Southern California beach town. Sounds lovely, right? So I was fortunate enough to be introduced to Sagit by a dear friend, Marissa, who said to me, Jen, do you know about Sagit Schwartz and her new book, Since She's Been Gone? You have to read this book. So that's one of the wonderful things about friends who know you so well that they put the right book in your hand at the right moment. Needless to say, I ordered the book, promptly read it, and then immediately sent 2 messages. One I sent to Marissa to say, oh my goodness, thank you so much for making me aware of this book. You're right. It's exactly what I needed to read. And then I sent a message to Sagit to say, thank you for writing the book. In a bit of a fangirl moment, I boldly asked, would you ever want to be a guest on Writers Unplugged? I don't think there was much hesitation when she generously said yes. And so here we are. I think there's a small lesson in there about taking a chance and asking because you just never know what might happen. And to fangirl a bit more, this book has been blurbed by Laura Lippman, Lisa Barr, Brendan Slocum, and rock star Zibby Owens. So please join me in a warm welcome to Sagit Schwartz.
What a welcome. Thank you so much, Jen. I am so excited to be here.
Yes, we are so glad to have you to be able to talk about this book, Since She's Been Gone. Would you kind of do like an elevator pitch for the book just to kind of give everybody an overview about what it's about?
Sure. It's about a psychologist in recovery from an eating disorder who learns the mom she lost to a hit and run 26 years before might still be alive and keeping dangerous secrets.
Yeah. And if you don't want to read that, I don't know what else to tell you, but it is a fabulous book. And, I imagine given your day job, right, that you see things or you hear things that might give you an idea for stories.
Yes.
Sometimes they say truth is stranger than fiction. So where did the idea for this book come from?
Well, I am no longer a practicing therapist. I'm still a licensed therapist. I keep my license current, but I have transitioned to writing full time. However, when I was a therapist, I did treat several women with eating disorders. And so I had that clinical background. And then the other piece of it was the fact that I lost my mom at a young age.
Oh,
and
sorry.
Through the years, I always wondered how my life have unfolded differently had she lived. And as more time went on, I started to think, gosh, what if I found out that she were actually still alive? What would that mean for my life? And so kind of both of those things merging was the inspiration for Since She's Been Gone, and why it's also a dual timeline thriller.
Absolutely.
I mentioned that at the beginning. So you're seeing both the past when Beatrice The
Mhm.
psychologist is a 15-year-old girl, and her mother supposedly was killed in a hit and run. And the
Mhm.
aftermath of that and the eating disorder she developed as a result of that loss. Well, I mean, not as a result, the trigger, I should say,
Yes.
the what made her vulnerable to, the risk factor for her
Mhm.
developing it. I want to be very careful with how I
Right.
speak about it. And then the present day, when she's a practicing psychologist and a new patient, well, someone
Mhm.
under the guise of a new patient shows up at her office and says, "Your mom's still alive." And
Yeah.
she's like, "What?" And,
Yeah.
and I'm not giving anything away because that
No,
literally happens in the first 2 pages.
that's exactly right. That was what I was going to talk about, is that, the opening scene, right? So, since she's been gone, a lot of writers, I think, always start with a what if question, or not always, but frequently. I mean, I think you all have these incredible imaginations, and the what if questions, and then the answers that kind of evolve in your storytelling are spectacular. So there's that. And then there's the fact that you want to hook readers right away. And literally within the first 2 pages, Beatrice's world is completely turned upside down, because here's somebody she thought she lost 20 plus years ago, and still alive and in trouble. So, and then the so-called patient who delivered that message disappears.
Yeah.
So,
So that's
it's
the catalyst, the mystery, the thriller of it all to propel the whole book forward.
right. And the thing that makes it even more interesting, it wasn't just somebody saying words, but they actually had a bracelet that looked like the bracelet that her mother wore. So it wasn't just, I mean, because you can hear things, and you
Correct.
don't always know if people are telling the truth or not. But then when you take it a step further and you have like this treasured object, um,
The
boy, if
proof.
I wasn't left gasping, at the end of that scene, and had to compulsively turn the page, yeah, to read what's next. And what's interesting is I was stopped by a colleague over the weekend, walking through the garden that joins our 2 buildings, and he was like, "Hey Jen, what are you reading?" And I was like, "Oh, I just finished, Since She's Been Gone." And he said, "Well, I'm not familiar. Why don't you tell me about it?" And so I started to do that elevator pitch. And then what I realized is, as I was talking and talking and talking, how nuanced this is, right? And how many different things are happening at the same time. And it's almost as if it were a set of Russian nesting dolls, right? You have dual timelines, right? We just talked about, Beatrice as a teen and then her as an adult. You have 2 different settings. You have New York, you have LA. You have the main character who happens to have an eating disorder and is in recovery, against the opioid crisis.
Yeah.
And so there's parallels, and at the same time there's conflicting. And so
Yeah.
how you masterfully put that together, well done.
Thank you. It's been interesting because the eating, just in terms of mental health representation, the eating disorder part, it takes, front and center, but there is this other component of the opioid crisis and a powerful political family kind of mirroring the Sacklers.
Yeah.
And I have had readers reach out about the opioid piece as well.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I'd have readers reach out regarding the eating disorder piece, but I have been surprised that I've had readers reaching out, both saying, I am this many years clean from pills, or my mom, had this issue. And mental health representation really matters. And sometimes it's almost easier to metabolize in fiction than a straight memoir, I think.
Absolutely. I think, you mentioned the word representation. So I manage the popular department in the library. It's like the only time in my life I can say I'm popular. That being said, it basically means I have all of the new books, and they're roughly 2 years old, or younger. So I get to see all the new great things that come out. And then after about 2.5 years, they go to their respective departments. So cookbooks will go to science and technology, and fiction will go upstairs to literature. And one of the things that I think is so important as a librarian, especially in today's world, is to have representation on the shelves of books that talk about different experiences. I think there's people who want to see themselves in a book,
Yes.
which is incredibly important. And I think there are people that want to read and understand a different experience. And as you said, in that safe mode of it being a book.
Mm-hmm. I've had readers reach out saying, who've personally been impacted by eating disorders, thankful for the representation. And then others who have said, I didn't know about this issue, and now I have more compassion for those suffering. I didn't understand what it was like to live with that. So you're right. It really matters on both of those fronts. Both is a mirror to oneself, and then also is a window into another human being's experience.
Right. Absolutely. So I'm joined in conversation this afternoon with Sagit Schwartz, author of Since She's Been Gone. I'm one of those readers, right, that reached out to you, having been recently diagnosed with an eating disorder, and was happy to see a character in a book that they weren't the victim, right? It was just a different part of them. So I'm still a librarian. I'm not just somebody who has an eating disorder, right? And I think that's so important for those of us who suffer from this to see that, and to gain hope from that, and to be seen as more than.
And what you just said about hope, I really wanted to write a story with this mental health representation that was rooted in hope, that recovery is possible. Yes, it can be challenging. Yes, it can be difficult, but there is hope. And that was so important to me, because it also happens to be the truth.
Absolutely. And to your point, I mean, it's not always easy. I mean, some days are better than others, right? I mean, just normal life. We just have this extra little hurdle to jump through 3 times a day, right? But it's doable. And I think that's so empowering, I think, for us as readers, to have somebody who speaks to that experience, right? And that character, and gets inside the mind, which you don't always see on TV, right? Books do this amazing thing where you get inside the brain and you understand how somebody's thinking and feeling. And there were moments, because I'm early on in this whole process, where you articulated what I couldn't find the words to say. And it's just so powerful to be able to do that.
I think that the thought process is what is so important, because you were just bringing up how this mental health issue has historically been portrayed on television.
Yeah.
And you're right. You don't get into the head of someone who is facing this challenge. And if anything, I think historically, eating disorders have been glamorized and sensationalized in media, which is part of the reason why I believe publishers have been reticent to take it on, because there really is, I mean, there aren't that many adult fiction books that deal with this topic. There are more YA and NA, new adult books, increasingly more dealing with it, but in adult contemporary fiction, it's pretty scarce.
Yeah. How did that conversation go with your publisher to say that this is the, idea, or with your agent? I'm still learning how this all works with you all.
I mean, my agent, I think, knew it might be a challenge to sell for this reason, because it wasn't just like a straight thriller. It had this other piece. But then when you think about the crime fiction genre, I mean, there's all kinds of other mental health representation, from addiction to PTSD related to domestic violence, to bipolar disorder, there's all kinds of representation. And so, I'm very fortunate that she was willing to take this on. And then also, I have to give a lot of credit to my editor, who went to bat for me at my publisher and said, with great power comes great responsibility. And we believe this book should be out there. And she fought for it. And so
I'm so glad she did.
Yeah, me too. For both of those reasons, it's out there.
Yeah, I think, I'm joined in conversation since she's been gone, written by the amazing Sagit Schwartz, that she fought for it because it's not just the token person with an eating disorder, right? So
Mhm.
you have a very, when I read for character, right? And so when you're somebody who is able to take and create these complex characters like we are as humans in real life, we're not all good, we're not all bad. um, I think it's really important that you capture that. And you did a wonderful job with Beatrice, in
Thank
capturing that, and how she's managing that and the people around. And, you know, there's all kinds of things with regard to mental health. And I'm glad that we're starting now to have conversations about it so that it
you.
becomes less, shameful, or, people feel weak for reaching out for help, whatever that mental health is. You wouldn't, walk around with a broken arm. I don't know why
That's
we
right.
do the same for mental health, but
I'm old enough to remember when Prozac Nation was published and
mhm,
what a seminal moment that was in terms of normalizing the use of antidepressants for
mhm,
depression and anxiety. In this particular mental health issue, I don't think has had its moment yet in terms of uh, representation to the point of normalization. So the more books, the more
correct.
people, the more it just becomes part of the conversation. And
Abs-
then that also, to your point, that strips away the shame that people can have, which is so prevalent with eating disorders,
mhm.
from getting, and it can prevent people from actually seeking help and treatment. And so bringing these conversations front and center destigmatizes this
Mhm.
issue, and it kind of it pushes one of the barriers out of the way for getting help.
Absolutely. And the same goes for, because this is a thriller, right? So you have this, high powered, political family that's in the
Mhm.
pharmaceutical industry. And I'm not sure if you know this, but I was in the pharmaceutical industry before.
I did
Well,
not know that.
I did. I knew the rep who worked for Purdue, just a normal, nice guy, but was only given a fraction of the information.
Yes.
Um, so, realizing now the impact of, and it's ironic as a librarian where we crave knowledge, right? And we want to share knowledge and share information with people. When that is held back, the impacts that it has, because this book is also about the opioid crisis and just how out of control it has become. Sadly, there's still good work being done. Absolutely. I'm not taking
Mhm.
that away. But when you have such a huge problem, it's going to take a huge effort to, kind of bring it back to normal.
Oh
So,
yeah. Oh yeah.
I am thinking about Beatrice, right? She has, the missing mom, right? And she's, struggling with the eating disorder, and she takes off trying to find her mom.
Right.
And there's a line where you talk about the difference between courage, which is action
Mhm.
in the face of fear, and fearlessness.
Right.
Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about those
Yeah.
distinctions?
I can't take credit for that. I think my former therapist said that to me.
Yeah.
So, courage is action in the face of fear.
Mhm.
Fearlessness is just more arbitrary. It's not because it's like you're not actually scared of anything, you're just going for it. And courage is a different deal. And it takes a lot of courage to choose eating disorder recovery.
Mhm.
So it is action in the face of fear. Oh, I can't eat that because I'm scared I'll gain weight, or I'm
Right.
scared, you know, all these irrational thoughts, but I am choosing it anyway because I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing my recovery. That
Mhm.
is what is paramount to me. And that is what I am prioritizing in my life. So viewing it as an act of courage,
That's helpful. So thank you.
because that is not because it is, it is, especially at the beginning of recovery. it takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage to be consistent and persistent, as taking each step. So yeah.
Yeah, I applaud you for writing this story and for giving that as part of Beatrice's story. It's not her entire story, right?
No. And this is a thriller and a mystery. And I've also had a lot of readers reach out just like, I like the action. I like the what's going to happen next. So there's that. Because I'm primarily a mystery and thriller reader. So that's what I write. It's the genre I like. So of course it was going to be that. Was it going to be a rom-com?
Yeah, no, it's terrific. Having just been to BoucherCon like 2 weeks ago.
I went last year, not this year.
Did you? Are you going next year?
I don't know yet. I don't know. Yeah. But I went last year. It was more local to me in San Diego.
Yes.
I'm in California. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm joined in conversation by the amazing Sagit Schwartz, author of Since She's Been Gone, incredible thriller. So let's talk a little bit about the thriller, right? And, talk about, courage in the face of fear, that Beatrice just picks up and heads, to New York to try to find her mom. And it's like, where do you even kind of begin? And how she is so determined, to find her.
And find out what happened, like what is going on. And she goes on this incredible heart-pounding journey, slowly piecing together her mother's life in college before she had even had her, before she'd even been married. And just one stunning revelation after another. That culminates with the very end where she just finds the biggest shock of all that actually relates to her story and parallel to what she is also facing in her life.
Absolutely.
And yeah, that was, I definitely enjoyed, I went to college in New York, and I definitely enjoyed bringing some of my experiences to that. So that was really fun. And just all the characters you meet there and the people. And so it is one turn after another. And the chapters are short, and it's meant to be very quick.
Well, it's how I ended up, not doing laundry and having cereal for dinner, right? It's like the hallmark of a good book. I'm like, well, just this one more chapter.
Biggest compliment ever for a thriller author to hear that from a reader. I ignored my life responsibilities for whatever it is, 24, 36 hours. Biggest compliment.
Oh, well, good. So can I talk a little bit about your writing, right? Because you have 2 timelines.
Yes.
So how do you approach that in your writing? Do you write like one timeline through and then the other timeline and then kind of figure out where they fit? Or?
Well, with this book, after I'd written the first 10 chapters, it was all in the present, but I found that half of each chapter I was talking about the past. And so that made me realize that it would be much better to, separate them out and then write the entire past is the past and the present is the present, because otherwise it was a lot of telling. And then this happened to me, and then that happened to me, versus showing and living it. And so fortunately I figured it out 10 chapters in, not after I'd written the whole book, so that I could then at that point split up the book into 2. And this was a bit complex. I actually had a huge scroll of paper, because it wasn't just the 2 timelines that are in the book. I also had to create the entire timeline for Beatrice's mom and what happened to her in the 70s. So even though that, the book takes place present day in the 90s, when Beatrice was in a residential eating disorder facility. after her mom died, and then in the present when she's searching for her mom. But I still needed to understand and have the timeline for Irene, her mother.
Absolutely.
So it was complex. It was that was complex, but I've gotten a lot of feedback from readers that they felt that the past timeline where Beatrice was in residential was visceral, captivating. The readers really responded to it, and I didn't. So again, this all happened organically. It's interesting though, because then after the book was sold, and my editor, they present the each quarter to the sales team the books that they have coming out, and the sales department was very excited because they said dual timeline thrillers sell really well. Well, I had no idea about any of that when I wrote it. As I just said, I was writing it straight through, not thinking of a dual timeline. It just organically happened.
Yeah. Well, so this is your first, if I'm remembering correctly, this is your first novel. You've
Yes.
done a lot of writing. So how is it different from writing an article? Obviously, writing an article shorter, I would argue sometimes.
I'm also in a lot of plays and television and that kind of stuff. I really like the novel writing the most because it's less structured, less rigid. You can get much more in people's heads. So I really actually enjoy it more. And I think though part of why I gravitate towards mysteries and thrillers is because it's fast moving, and actually film and television writing is very fast. There's not one word that is wasted. And so, so I actually prefer novel writing the most.
Good. So does that mean that there's like more novels coming from you that we can?
Yes. It's all happening. I have 3 more chapters left to write of my current work in progress, and then some editing before it'll go to my editor. Pitching it as None of This Is True meets Sunset Boulevard movie. So it's a fun popcorn movie with characters who are chaotic and messy and
just like life,
right? Suffer a bit, grieve, delusions of grandeur, just a combination of characters you love to hate, and then the straight protagonist. So it's been a hoot to write. I've had a lot of fun writing this book.
Good. I mean, if it's not fun, then kind of why do it, right? I mean, there should be some parts that are, challenging, but the fact that overall you're having a fun experience writing it, I think is terrific.
Yeah.
So you typically write in the morning or
morning? I do my best work earlier in the day. By 2, 3, my brain is just, it's not, I can do like laundry and like house tasks and those kinds of things, but earlier in the day is gold.
Good. Yeah.
For that kind of thinking.
Absolutely. The other thing, speaking of like dual timelines in here, there's a quote that you talk about in terms of time and the concept of time. You say that time is devious in the way it silently accumulates before bearing down all at once.
Yeah, I as I get older, I feel it more and more. That feeling of where did all the time go? Where is it going? And I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's, you get older and it's Monday and then it's Friday and then it's Monday and then it's Friday, and your life is passing.
Yes.
So really seizing the moment and making every day count, because it speeds up as you get older. Feels that way.
It does, because I'm like, the days have this same amount of time, but like as a kid, it would seem like forever until school was over and it was summer vacation, right? It would seem forever, and it's like, wait a second, we're already in like almost the third week of September already. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
And truly it feels like the blink of an eye.
It really
But
does.
just that phrase, like, silently accumulates before bearing down all at once. Like, it's palpable. I think to your point, we've all felt that way.
Felt it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so there's that. So I'm joined in conversation with Sagit Schwartz. Since she's been gone, thriller book, mystery book. Mom goes missing in the very beginning, and then the rest of the book is her trying to scramble to figure out, is she missing? Is she still around, and all of that. Short chapters, darn you, because you just want to read, like, and do nothing but read and finish this book, because you're now invested in Beatrice, who's such a great character. And then she's dating a great guy who has what seems to be an adorable daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So the cast of characters that surround her, how do you choose those characters for your main protagonist?
Well, in Beatrice's case, I wanted her journey to mirror her mom's in a way. So that was in play. And I also wanted to write a thriller where you were rooting for the protagonist, where you wanted things to turn out well for her, and that it did have a hopeful ending, which is a bit different from a lot of thrillers, with the anti-heroes. And so this was a different kind of one in that sense.
Can we also talk a little bit about Beatrice and the struggle that she has with her father? She lost her mom at an early age, an age where I think us as teen girls probably need our moms the most, as we're going through all those, we'll just say, life changes.
Yeah.
And so, initially she doesn't have a great relationship with her dad, because the eating disorder is kind of what determines how she acts and influences her behavior. And then they repair their relationship and are good, but she loses him, and the sense of guilt that she feels, because she feels like she caused him stress, and that's what caused him to get sick. Just a lot to reconcile.
It is. But I think by the end, we realized that, he had made certain choices too in his life. And so this really wasn't just all on her. But of course, at the time, she didn't know that. So she did have that sense of guilt. That relationship, that father-daughter relationship, I've also had readers reach out to me about it and say how visceral it was for them, and how in a way it broke their heart, but they also loved it. It felt real and authentic, because relationships really are quite complex. Most human relationships are complex.
Absolutely. Yeah, you hit that nail on the head. And I think that's one of the great gifts that you all as writers give us as readers, is the ability to have that visceral response, to flinch, as we're about to turn the page, to not know what happened, to have our heart break a bit as we're reading, because we've become attached to a character. And gosh, there's part of this book when she's a teen and she's in the treatment center that kind of reminds me a bit of Girl Interrupted. Don't know if that's appropriate to say, but just
that's a big inspiration for me. So thank you.
No, I mean, I felt that reading it, and palpable. So I'm thinking, this incredible Venn diagram, right? You have your background, as a psychologist and a psychotherapist. You have that screenwriting, so you're really good at capturing atmosphere and the details that make you feel as if you're, just kind of like peeking in and kind of watching what's happening, without them hopefully seeing you, right? But you're a reader, so no. And so it comes through, and you have these characters that are so complex and so human. And hearing you talk this afternoon about how many people have reached out to you, people who have reached out because of the dynamic between her and her father, people who have reached out because of losing a mom at a young age, people who have struggled with an eating disorder or who have friends and family that now understand it better, to people who have an opioid, they're in recovery because of this crisis that we're seeing nationwide. Just how humbling that has to be as a writer to know how many people you've impacted.
It's, this path in terms of career isn't like an easy one, but those moments where you really feel like you've helped people and it's impacted them in such a profound way are such big wins, bigger than anything I could have frankly imagined before. And I'm grateful for all of the readers who have reached out and the wonderful people I've been able to connect with, like you, Jen, today. It's really the blessing of all of this.
Yeah. And I can only imagine all the people who haven't reached out to you, but are reaching out to other people and having these discussions. I think it was Jodi Picoult who said about writing books that it allows us to have honest, tough conversations because we're talking about characters. We're not talking about the person that's sitting next to us or across from us.
True.
So just being able to have that quote unquote safe space to have tough conversations, to see different perspectives and realize it's not, I would love it if life were concrete, right? And it was black or white or right or wrong. And when you realize as human beings how nuanced we are.
Yes.
There's no way.
I've done several book clubs now, and I've been also amazed at how open and forthright many, I've only done book clubs with women so far, but it seemed like in each one, everyone had some story related to an eating disorder, even if it was decades past, even if it was recent. And how open people were to talking about it. So again, that it shows that it's there. It's just people are waiting for a chance and an opportunity to connect with others about this specific topic.
Absolutely. It's so much easier to have that conversation versus like, hey, did you see the Guardians just won an extra innings today? And, oh, by the way, I have an eating disorder. Like, there's really no good segue into some of these tough topics. And so, your book, Since She's Been Gone, is a wonderful way to do that. And then, if nothing else, if you don't take any of that away, just this incredible mystery thriller with the right pacing to figure out. And just when you think you have it figured out and you're reading it, it just kind of pivots again. And I'm like, darn it, I thought I had it. So, it is a great thing to see that all of those kind of combined, for good. So.
Well, thank you for having me today.
Oh, are you kidding? The other line that you use in there, which I think is important, and maybe this, kind of comes from your own experiences, that just because people are gone doesn't mean they leave us.
Yeah.
And I think we all can relate, to that comment, to have had some type of profound loss and feel a little off kilter.
Feel them deep in your soul. It's like they might be physically gone, but they're really not. They're so embedded inside of you, in the core of your being.
Right. So I'm trying to think what else I should ask. Oh, one of the things, and I think it makes me think about your previous background as a psychotherapist is, and as a writer, is narrative. The stories that we tell ourselves and how facts versus fiction type of approach. Sometimes we tell ourselves our story about an experience, and is that really quite accurate? Is that how things are really perceived or people perceive us? So.
Yeah. That also, a lot of mental health issues, the quote, depression lies, can tell people things about themselves that isn't true.
Mm-hmm.
You can apply that to eating disorders, like thought processes that are false, actually. They're not real.
But
And
they feel
fighting,
real.
they feel real,
Mhm.
and, pushing back against them. And whatever way one does. Some
Yeah.
people have a more amicable relationship with those thoughts, like, oh, hey, anxiety, hi, old
Mhm.
friend, you're back again. I'm
Yeah.
not really in the mood to chat today.
Yeah.
And they approach it more in that way.
Mhm.
And others just taking a very strong stance, like, nope, bye, we're not doing this, but
Yeah.
just awareness of that.
Absolutely. I read something called the Rosenberg effect.
I don't know.
There's like 7 emotions, like hard emotions or tough emotions that we feel, but those emotions will last for 80 seconds.
Interesting.
So it's just being able to sit for those 80 seconds and then they pass. And then you're back to, whatever the correct term is, whether it's emotional regulation or, cognitive behavioral, whatever the right word is, but just being able to sit with it instead of distract and just know, like, for 80 seconds,
It'll pass.
and then it'll pass. But I think we get so worried about feeling stuff that it feels bigger than it is. And then, like, it happens and you're like, oh, I was worried for that.
Right. It went.
So
It came.
yeah, exactly. So yeah. So I thought it was really kind of an interesting perspective on feelings and emotions. So the other thing that you do beautifully in this book is really highlight the grace that comes with the second chance.
Yeah. I think that we all wish for that in life, whatever it might be, just to give ourselves a second chance, to give someone else a second chance. You never know what another person is going through, what it means to walk in their shoes, and to look at others with that lens, which you would hope they would, the compassion that you hope one would extend to you as well.
Absolutely. I think it's really important that we're all more aware and more mindful. We don't typically know what people are coming from, and we don't always know what they're going to. So sometimes, yeah.
Well, I was just saying, and since she's been gone, Irene, Beatrice's mom, got a second chance, and Beatrice also gets to choose if she wants to give herself a second chance. I think the knowledge that her mom gave herself the grace to do it is also empowering to Beatrice to give herself.
Yeah. There's also a quote in the book by researcher Harriet Breiker. The art of clinical diagnosis lies in the ability to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the section of the book before Beatrice takes off for New York to find out what happened to her mom. She's got to ask a lot of questions to a lot of different people to become this detective, to try and piece everything together. And it also mirrors her in her clinical capacity with patients when she has to do investigations and ask questions to get her arms around the person sitting in front of her and what issues they might be facing.
Yeah. I sometimes think, as librarians, we're doing something similar when we do a reference interview, is making sure that we're asking the right questions to give the customer what it is that they need. And sometimes you have to ask, further questions to truly understand, because sometimes what they ask for isn't necessarily what they really want, but they're just using lingo, and we all have lingo, in all our industries and all our backgrounds. And sometimes that creates this artificial barrier, right, to knowledge. So, but I have been absolutely thrilled being able to talk to you this afternoon.
Likewise.
So we'll go to the final 5 questions.
Okay. Let's do
Okay.
it.
What's the most unusual request you've made as a writer?
Well, that's about to happen. I'm about to ask people if they know anyone knows Cher or has any contact related to Cher.
Okay, we'll start digging. There you go. What is a favorite movie that you can watch again and again and never get tired of?
The Fugitive.
Do you know I live in the town where that happened?
Really?
I live in the town, a village, and right down the street is the hospital where Sam Shepard. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Who knew? Who knew? Are you a night owl or an early bird?
Early.
What city would you rather live in, New York or LA?
LA. As long as it's by the beach.
I was going to say that the beach is a big win.
Yeah.
And then what's the best piece of advice that you can give to all of us today?
Regarding what? Life,
Sure.
writing, whatever.
Whatever. Yeah.
I would just say, in terms of like where we're at in the world and the country, just slowing down and not making assumptions about what any other person is going through. And we talked about grace earlier, but just giving people grace. And that would be my advice.
Ironically, there was a journalist who used to write for a Cleveland paper, and she would say at the end of the year, choose a word for the next year and use that word to kind of define the year. If you have to make decisions, which decision honors that particular word. And ironically, on my wrist is the word that I chose for this year, which is grace.
Oh,
see how it all comes together.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly where I'm supposed to be at this moment.
That's right.
So, yeah. So I want to say a huge thank you to all of you who are watching and listening. And thank you to our tech team, Mike, for making sure everything went smoothly. Thank you to MaxBacks Books for having copies of Sagit's book, just waiting for you to call or stop in. And then finally, a huge thank you to you, Sagit Schwartz, for writing Since She's Been Gone for so many reasons, as a mystery, as a thriller, as a wonderful story, and all the topics in between. I'm Jen Jumbo with Writers Unplugged. Thank you so much and happy reading.